So let's begin looking at the details of More's What is Philosophy, which is the first chapter of his book, Some Main Problems in Philosophy. I think that it's very readable, but as far as looking at it more analytically, you can think of the chapter of the essay really as a self-standing essay, as well as the introductory chapter in the book. You can think of it as being comprised of three parts: a brief introduction in the first couple of pages, page 1 and 2, and then the heart of the essay, which is a long description of what he calls the view of common sense, which is the view of common sense on this opening question, or this task that he says philosophers set themselves, which is to give a general description of the whole of the universe. He goes into some detail what he claims to be the common sense view, the view that most people hold, the view that ordinary people hold in terms of what there is in the world, or what sort of things there are in the world. And then a third part, which is really farther on in the essay as we move forward, which is really the way that philosophers, some of them at least in the history of philosophy, have contradicted common sense in one way or another. In some cases, not outright contradicted common sense, but differed from common sense, and in other ways outright contradicted the views of common sense on what there is in the universe. And that's the latter part of the page. So if you're thinking of approaching this systematically or breaking this reading down, I think there are three parts: a brief introductory part, a long middle part where he describes the actual views, what he would say would turn out to be the metaphysical views of common sense, that is, the view of common sense. We'll also talk about what he means by common sense on what there is in the world, what sort of things exist in the world. And then a discussion after that description of common sense in the way that some philosophers, great philosophers, have differed wildly from the common sense view of what exists. So going back to the first part, just a few remarks about that. He says he wants to give us an idea of what philosophers do, and he says right away, and they're there in the second paragraph, I'm going to try to give a description of the whole range of philosophy, but this is not an all easy thing to do. It is not easy because when you come to look into the matter, you find that philosophers have in fact discussed an immense variety of different sorts of questions, and that's true. And I think I hope that I've acknowledged that. That you couldn't really go into everything that philosophers talk about and everything that they think is important. But what we're trying to do in this class is identify the most basic questions, the broadest questions, and the questions which really have the most implications in terms of everything else. And that's what More is trying to do, I think, too, in this essay. At the bottom of that first page, he says, to begin with, then, it seems to me that the most important and interesting thing which philosophers have tried to do is no less than this, namely, to give a general description of the whole of the universe. Now, that's interesting, right? What would a general description of the whole of the universe be? Well, first of all, it's not a particular description of the whole of the universe. It's a general one. That particular description, I'm imagining, would be a list of all the things that exist in the universe, and that might be very difficult to compile such a list. But a general description of the whole of the universe might actually be possible. He goes on to say, mentioning all the most important kinds of things which we know to be in it. That is, kinds of things. Instead of listing, let's say, my pencil, the White House, my copy of Huckleberry Finn, etc., we would say, well, there's a kind of thing that exists called material objects, and then we have classified all those things. We have categorized all those things, mentioning all the important kinds of things which we know to be in the universe, considering how far it is likely that there are in it important kinds of things we do not absolutely know to be in it, and also considering the most important things most important ways in which these various kinds of things are related to each other. Okay. So what would a general description of the universe be? Well, it would be a statement of the kinds of things that exist. The kinds of things that the universe, which just means the world, the everything, all of reality, is actually populated by. And that is one of the things that philosophers have attempted to do throughout the history of philosophy, is to say what there is in the world. And of course, there's different ways of saying that. One of the important distinctions that we'll see with More is there's a big difference in saying what I know to be in the world, and as opposed to saying what is in the world and what is not in the world. That is, it's an important difference to say on the one hand that I believe or I know that certain kind of things exist in the world. It's another thing entirely to say that the things that I know that exist in the world are the only kind of things that could exist in the world. As we'll see, it seems to me that he, in his description of common sense, is that common sense is pretty sure that, let's say, material objects and what he calls mental acts of consciousness both exist and are substantive, real things in the world. But common sense does not go as far as to say that they are the only things that exist in the world, that there may be other sorts of things, and that maybe one of More's problems with the philosophers is that they have a tendency to not only say what they think exists in the world, but to say that the things that they think exist in the world are the only sort of things that exist in the world.